Over recent years, interest in philosophy has seemingly grown to new heights. The introduction of the internet has allowed philosophy to move outside of the classroom, library, and reading group. Now, people are able to study philosophy within settings that are not strictly academic. Subreddits, social media accounts, and YouTube channels, like my own, share readily accessible and oftentimes introductory or arguably surface-level content on various topics in philosophy. As someone fond of philosophy, I believe this growth to be a great thing. However, oftentimes this increase in quantity has come at the cost of quality, as a number of problems plague what may be termed internet philosophy, as in the group of online content creators, video producers, influencers, and bloggers who focus on philosophical topics. So, throughout this video, I'd like to elucidate some of these problems, like misinformation and plagiarism, and argue that they arise because of a lack of academic rigor, stemming from a profit motive, and excused by way of distancing from academic philosophy. But allow me to begin at the last of these parts. What do I mean by internet philosophy's distancing from academic philosophy? Luckily enough, a succinct demonstration of exactly what I mean fell onto my lap, or rather, my Instagram Explore page, from the vastly popular Instagram account, Daily Stoic. Here it is.
Although there are certainly philosophers alive today, I would argue almost nobody cares what those philosophers are doing. They don't care what kind of car they drive. They don't care what they think about this or that. They exist in almost a purely academic setting. That was not what philosophy was in the ancient world, and that's not what philosophy is supposed to be. To me, what is so powerful about the Stoics, why I wrote this book, was that the purpose of philosophy is to improve yourself as a human being.
Those of you who commonly peruse philosophical content online are likely already familiar with this line of thinking. A number of claims are being presented here, all of which seek to distance what the Daily Stoic is doing from, say, what goes on at an academic conference. He uses an alternative, seemingly unproblematic definition of philosophy to render academic philosophers irrelevant, and furthermore, claims that these same academics are not true to the ways of ancient Western philosophy, nor to what philosophy is supposed to be. At the root of this is philosophy's new definition. As he said, the purpose of philosophy is to improve yourself as a human being. Now this claim at first appears unproblematic. Why wouldn't we want to use philosophy to improve ourselves as human beings? And while that's how the statement may sound, it isn't quite what's being said. By saying that the purpose of philosophy is to improve yourself as a human being, the Daily Stoic places philosophy as subordinate to self-improvement. Self-improvement is the purpose and foundation of philosophy. We read philosophy in order to improve ourselves, just as we work out, eat healthy, study more, wake up at 6 a.m., read more, and so on, all in order to improve ourselves. But this misses the point that at least a part of philosophy is the inquiry into these very foundations. Philosophy brings into doubt our most basic presuppositions and raises the most basic of questions. The claim of the Daily Stoic has already assumed a number of answers to questions that have been asked within philosophy for centuries. What is it to be better or to be good? What is the self? What is a human being? Now, one could respond saying, but those are matters of theoretical philosophy. What the Daily Stoic is talking about is practical philosophy. And while this may be true, the distinction between the two can't overshadow the fact that the practical is founded on the theoretical, whether or not the particular theoretical philosophy is made explicit. In the case of the Daily Stoic, the theory presupposed raises no issues because it is no different than our common, everyday assumptions. But it's the task of philosophy to raise the question, are my assumptions about what there is, what I know, and how I ought to live true? Given that academic philosophy is where these questions are most commonly brought into examination, it would already follow from this logic that academic philosophy is what philosophy is supposed to be. But I'd like to challenge this conception of the ivory tower of academia on more physical grounds. Given that Marcus Aurelius isn't here making posts on the Instagram account, how have his words gotten there? Has it not been from the transmission, translations, and analysis of countless academics? How are we to make sense of quite anything that the Stoics had said without the work of many academics? Clearly, the Daily Stoic does care about what philosophers who focus on Stoicism think about this or that. And furthermore, the idea that academics live in an almost purely academic setting is just a lie. Of course, they do tend to live near their institutions, but they're still humans, they aren't aliens. And in just talking to a professor or an academic, one quickly finds out that they find relevance in their studies to everyday life. Now, insofar as I've made a distinction between academic and internet philosophy, my account has been somewhat misleading. The internet is not devoid of academic philosophy. In fact, it is precisely because of the internet that academia cannot reasonably be considered inaccessible these days. I made this comment on a video I'll talk about later, but essentially academic philosophy has populated the internet so much so that there are few areas that remain intellectually inaccessible. Websites like Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy are free and helpful once one has a rough idea of the particular topic they're looking into. The most influential philosophical works are available free online if you just have a look. And when a paywall is met, a kind email to the article's author often gets around the paywall. In reality, academic philosophy isn't all that inaccessible, and, because of the internet, no longer requires the cost or attendance of an institution of higher education. Finally, the Daily Stoic has clearly been a bit too focused on the Stoics themselves, because a simple look to Socrates, who the Stoics considered a sage, reveals the role of inquiry in philosophy, and Plato, whose writing popularized the term philosophy, which is Greek for the love of wisdom, founded the Academy, and the writings we have of Aristotle, who succeeded Plato at the Academy, are most likely to be his lecture notes. Only after did the Stoics come as, in part, a product. Not to mention that the Stoics had a theoretical philosophy of their own, with metaphysical beliefs that are not all that consistent with those of modern Stoics. So, while the ideas peddled by the Daily Stoic may seem appealing, and of course succeed in attracting many, they are misleading, and I believe intentionally so. For what this distancing from academic philosophy excuses are the problems that plague internet philosophy, because the worst of the problems with internet philosophy stem from a lack of academic rigor. Misinformation and plagiarism go unchecked on online platforms like YouTube. I don't think it's radical to say that content that couldn't so much as pass for an essay during an introductory philosophy course shouldn't be well studied by millions. Clearly, I wouldn't say that the entire internet can be expected to be without misinformation. Of course, comments, blog posts, and anonymous accounts can't be expected to always substantiate themselves and cite their sources properly. But creators within internet philosophy that claim intellectual authority, often just via popularity, ought to be held to higher standards. There appears to be no genuine standard at all, as any content that has to do with philosophy is automatically commended for being deep and profound. Rarely are they examined in a critical light, and even in the cases that they are, those criticisms are drowned out by blind applause. Let me use an example. I'd say that at this point I have a moderate proficiency in the study of Taoism, enough so that I know how the label itself is extremely complicated and divisive. Yet, the most popular videos on Taoism equate it to the Tao Te Ching, and attribute it to the old sage Lao Tzu. And, in their quotes, they offer no more specificity than attributing it to Lao Tzu, no chapter, no translation, no way of identifying where these quotes even came from. And a quick look at the comments shows the practice imitated there as well. One, introduced to Taoism through this, will take it to be none other than the archaic words written by an old sage who left China at around 500 BCE, trying to get us to just go with the flow. That is a rather misinformed view, since it is unlikely that one person wrote the Tao Te Ching, and even more unlikely that it was written in 500 BCE, and furthermore, the Tao Te Ching and Taoism are not synonymous, and Taoism as just go with the flow is an extreme simplification of one branch of understanding that has been reappropriated for Western populations, and the same can be said for a lot of Eastern philosophy. But all this isn't to say that videos must present ideas that are irrefutable, if such a thing is even possible. At the least, as works of philosophy, they should be presented based on informed research, and they should solicit developed criticisms. Second, internet philosophy is not only riddled with unoriginality and even plagiarism, it oftentimes incentivizes it. In professional academia, originality of thinking, perspective, or method is a requirement, and even for high school papers, there are resources like turnitin.com that prevent plagiarism. Yet there is nothing of either sort for YouTube and social media, and nor is there a method for accountability other than actively calling it out into the void that is the internet. As a result, videos and video topics are repeated over and over again. How much does another video introducing the Stoic concept of amor fati really contribute? Introductory videos to common areas are oversaturated, yet this oversaturation doesn't stop the new production of these videos. While I think some of it may have to do with a disinterest by specific YouTubers to genuinely formulate an argument, or dip their toes into unfamiliar waters, I would attribute a lot of it to the functionality of the platform. The success of particular YouTube videos incentivizes the creation of similar, or nearly identical videos, One need only look up the name Taoism and Flow to show the sheer quantity of content repeating the same mediocre introductory ideas spliced with misinformation. If there is no accountability whatsoever, there's nothing preventing creators from repeating the same misconceptions ad infinitum. At times, this can even be blatant plagiarism. I've been blessed with experiencing some of this myself, and who's to say that this isn't the case with multitudes of videos, most of which go unnoticed. Academic philosophy is certainly not perfect, but at least when an unoriginal or even plagiarized paper is turned in, there is the possibility of accountability. Now, given that you've accepted my argument thus far and seen how internet philosophy often misinforms and copies in disingenuous ways, the question would follow, well, why? And the answer is profit. Almost every video made by what may be seen as an authoritative internet philosophy content producer is tied to a Patreon, a sponsorship, monetization, a link to their book, or an affiliate link. Of course, this is so common that simply saying this is nearly meaningless. But the point is that internet philosophy content is produced for profit. Again, this isn't surprising. Rather, it's that for many creators, their intention is not to explore new and engaging ideas, to share some of their thoughts with the world, or to facilitate philosophical discussion. Their intention is to create a profit through selling philosophy. Now, there's already been a pretty good video made by Professor of Philosophy Hans-Georg Moeller about the commodification of philosophy, so I'd suggest that you check that out. But if you haven't, here are a couple of his main points.
If you move philosophy education from the university, from the academic system, to the internet, to the social media, then two things happen. First of all, commodification does not disappear. It takes on a different shape, and probably actually a much more kind of aggressive shape. Secondly, in this context, what happens is, of course, because it's about attracting attention, because it's about attracting views, is what I talked about in the first video, how the emphasis and the effort of the production of philosophy shifts to the presenter rather than to the content.
On top of these, I'd like to add two arguments. First, creators of philosophical content whose primary goal is to generate revenue will inevitably be at odds with truth and accuracy. Of course, if you value profit more than you do truth, then the former will be opted for whenever a choice must be made. And in the case of philosophy, this can commonly occur. Where misinformation is already prevalent, it is more profitable to create content that confirms people's misconceptions. While challenges and critiques are a serious endeavor tied to the core of philosophical practice, they are seemingly non-existent in internet philosophy, because criticism runs the risk of stepping on someone's toes. And when those toes are tied to your bottom line, you'll opt to walk around them and confirm the maximum number of beliefs. Those with a primary intention of making profit are likely to produce quick, unoriginal, and not well-researched videos that do little more than gain them some cash. To hop on the bandwagon, quote Lao Tzu, "Pleasing words can be used to market, and pleasing words are not truthful." Now, you could agree with me thus far, only to raise a challenge, saying, alright, where internet philosophy prefers profit over accuracy, their quality suffers, but without this profit motive, there wouldn't be the level of accessibility that there is now. But this challenge greatly overestimates the benefit of the profit motive and underestimates its negative influence. We've already seen above how a profit motive drives creators to produce repetitive, poorly informed videos with no intention of rectification, and we've already seen how ignored the modern accessibility of academic philosophy is. Ultimately, the content of internet philosophy is oversaturated with readily accessible material and devoid of original ideas that would genuinely expand accessibility to broader philosophy. Furthermore, the idea that philosophy would not be conducted without a profit motive is just absurd. If that were the case, then what are people doing majoring in philosophy? What are people doing getting PhDs, knowing full well that job prospects are pretty bad? What are anonymous people doing contributing to Wikipedia pages with nothing to gain? And what are academics doing reviewing articles for free, publishing beyond the attainment of tenure, and educating beyond just the classroom? Philosophy doesn't need a profit motive, and genuine philosophy never has. With all that said, we can return to the Daily Stoic and see that his words were not motivated by a love of wisdom. He was selling a book, and where profit is present, philosophy cannot be in whole. Now, I haven't said all of this to damn the enterprise of internet philosophy and educational content online. I've said all of this to warn viewers and demand better of it. Where words and ideas are taken from another, they ought to be properly quoted and properly cited, such that you could trace them back. And where content is already oversaturated, new content shouldn't be thrown in as well, unless it is truly to be the best. As for viewers, I would advise approaching every piece of content with an open but critical mind, and ultimately holding these ideas accountable. In many ways, internet philosophy is far more influential than the philosophy classes of college, and it's time to raise the standards accordingly. It is still my belief that YouTube as a platform offers some of the greatest potential to explore philosophical content. Its audio-based format allows for material to be more easy to digest than just pages and pages of words. And its potential for visuals allows the displaying of properly cited quotes. Its lengthy and nearby description allows for proper citations and links alongside timestamps. Its comment section holds the possibility for critical and productive engagement, even if this is rarely the case. The potentiality for quality is immense, even if the actuality is not so much so. And none of this is to say that my videos are particularly good, but I do my best to adhere to these standards, show my work, and encourage criticism. All that being said, this video has been highly critical, and if I stepped on any toes, I am, well, not sorry. I don't make these videos for money, so I don't have to spoon-feed anyone's confirmation bias, and neither does anyone have to feed my own. So if you have any criticisms or further ideas, feel free to leave them below. If it may be said that I get something from these videos, it's a better understanding of the ideas that I explore, and, when I'm lucky, alternative perspectives and critiques in the comments below. And, well, that's all. I hope you all didn't mind a more meta video. As someone who's consumed a lot of internet philosophy and now produced some of it, I thought I could offer a unique take. And the study of ideas interests me a bit, since it seems reasonable to want to know where you got your knowing from. But I'll return with some more original philosophical content in the following videos. If you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. If not, let me know why down below. And until next time.